Well, hello there. And today, we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of people seem to be interested in, but they write it off as basic biology when we all know that biology is anything but basic, right? I want you to harken back to your high school days, and if you're anything like me, that was at least 15 years ago, maybe even more if you're older. And definitely more for high school biology, at least within the state that I live in. And I want you to recall what you know about the X and Y chromosomes. I mean, it's X and Y chromosome. There's only two of them, and there's only two combinations that you could possibly have, XX and XY, right? I mean, let's be honest, that's actually nowhere near enough to really talk about the topic in any kind of detail. I mean, and for the most part, it's wrong. There's not. Let me be correct on what I'm saying here. It's wrong because it doesn't go far enough to explain everything. In humans, there's only two sex-determinative chromosomes, the X and the Y. However, that is nowhere near far enough to explain the entirety of the animal kingdom by itself. All right, and let's not even talk about anything like the fungus, the protozoans, or anything else beyond that, okay? Because that is way too much for here. Instead, we are going to focus purely on animals. An example that immediately comes to mind, for me at least, is the Komodo dragon. All right? In the Komodo dragon, they have three. They have X, Y, and W. I mean, that's strange, right? It's not something that's taught to us in basic biology. And pulling from the wider animal kingdom as a whole, there's W, X, Y, and Z. And you can have a variety of different combinations of these. In ants, as the example, you have all of the females being produced as WX, and in all the males, they are produced as ZY. So that way, their genes don't produce infertile or inviable offspring. You know, it's one of those ways to get around that pesky little thing that Alabama loves to do. And it's not something that only appears in non-mammalian species. There's also species of rodents that are laid out with these same kinds of genetic variations to them. But we do commonly see them in either eusocial creatures or animal species that are parthenogenic in some form or fashion. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, why didn't you actually hear about this in those high school biology classes? I mean, it's not like adding two extra chromosomes into the way that things are actually taught would really change your preconceived notions of anything. It wouldn't change the actual lessons that you were being taught. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't change much. So why exclude them? I mean, if it's common enough that you see it all throughout the animal kingdom in a whole bunch of different places, why not teach it? I mean, heck, that word that I mentioned earlier, parthenogenetic, right? That's probably something you're hearing for the first time here, unless you, well, I mean, unless you're actually interested in biology for some reason, which, I mean, you should be. But, like, what does it mean? I mean, it's an animal species that gives birth solely by itself. Oh, you mean like them asexual? No. No. Don't you dare. Nothing to do with that. But it is a form of asexual reproduction, which you should know about from a whole bunch of different species like anemones, right? They bud. But I mean, like, these aren't concepts that a high schooler wouldn't be able to understand. I mean, you're probably able to easily understand it too. So why aren't a lot of these things taught to us, and when we realistically should be able to learn them? Well, that's because of social constructs are things that I've talked about here and there on the channel before. In fact, I have an entire video dedicated to them, which, there should be a link up here somewhere. They are purely determined by societal needs and norms, meaning that you could have a social construct for something that has no purpose outside of purely a societal classification. My common go-to example for this is fish, but there's a whole host of them all throughout the world. And a lot of them have to do with us. The most pressing example that I could possibly give on that is the term race. In science, the term race is basically synonymous with the term species. They mean exactly the same thing. But within society and with our social constructs applied, we've taken that meaning to really just be a differentiation between what color your skin is. From a genetic understanding, there is only one species of human on the entirety of the planet. There are no subspecies, there are no variations within what is human right now. And that largely harkens back to a whole different issue that I have with the term human. So that'll be a different video. So why do social constructs affect our understanding of biology in such a way that we can't teach the other possible chromosomes or other different methods of reproduction and what they're actually called in high school biology? Well, that comes down to how we view sex in the first place. In most European-centric cultures, sex is always viewed as a binary between male and female. But, honestly, what do those terms actually mean? If you're going to pull it down to purely X and Y chromosome, well, anything that has an X and anything that has a Y has to be, what they are. But there are multiple variations within that, and in science, that is not a concrete set of terms to use. Because, the moment that you deviate from something, like if you have an atom, right? The classifications for that atom are what make up that atom. The moment you change any of that, that is no longer the same thing. It can't be hydrogen if it has 3 protons. Or 2 even. Right? So it's not a concrete enough term to apply universally. Sure, something might have that Y chromosome, but calling it male is the same as calling hydrogen not hydrogen. There are examples where hydrogen isn't hydrogen. Like, you can use heavy water, which is... I'm getting sidetracked. And so, as, European cultures that do as they do, and, small colonialism, their ideas tend to spread a lot further out. And so that has become the norms, especially when a lot of science is rooted in Europe. Yeah. You can't really get away from that. The majority of our understanding for a lot of things is rooted in the European teachings that came about in the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century. So, they're going to predominantly be affected by their social understanding of things, and so that social understanding then translates out further and further and further, even though it's wrong. Why is everything the British fault? So you might be sitting here and thinking, okay, well, all of that applies outside of humans, but we know that humans are born XX or XY, right? Well, even that's wrong. Within humans, there are 6 commonly recognized configurations, right? And when I say they are common, I mean they are common. And those configurations are X, which is 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 5,000 people. XX, which is the most common female. XXY, which is 1 in 500 to 1 in 1,000. XY, which is the most common male. XYY, which is 1 in 1,000, and XXXY, which is 1 in 18,000 to 1 in 50,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So, just for comparison of numbers, my hometown has a population roughly around 60,000. And for that last one, which is the least common of the 6 most common propagations of chromosomal distribution, they'd have somewhere between 1 and 3 of those people within their population just by statistical values, which means that it is almost certain that you've encountered someone who has a chromosomal distribution that is different from what you normally expect. And odds are good that neither you nor that person, if you've ever met them, would know that they have some kind of difference within their chromosomes. Largely because it's, 1, not taught, and 2, not tested for unless you have some severe medical condition going on. And I mean, let's really face the facts. You're going to know if you have some kind of medical condition going on revolving around your X and Y chromosomes, because it's kind of weird for a guy to start bleeding from somewhere, right? But that kind of brings us into a whole different part of this discussion that's also not taught in basic biology. Because, of course, biology is anything but basic. Your independent systems within your body, I'm talking like the endocrine system, your reproductive systems, your neurological systems, your blood production systems, like all of that, all right? Those all can have different chromosomal compositions because biology is weird. And there is no standard distribution throughout the body. You can take 2 cells from the same person and not be guaranteed that they have the exact same matching chromosomes anywhere. So like, those examples that people give all the time of, they've got that girl brain trapped inside the boy body. That's not just an example. That can actually happen. Your brain is biologically female, but the rest of your body is biologically male, or one of the other possible variations of it. And then there's the topic of genetic chimeras, which is also a term that you're probably not familiar with because high school biology sucks at teaching these things. A genetic chimera is a creature that has more than one genetic sequence within their body. Most of the time it arises from something like the absorption of a fetal twin, which I don't know how familiar you are with that topic, but it's quite common. And what you end up having is a creature that has 2 separate genetic sequences within their body. You see this often with dogs like huskies, the heterochromacy that they have, the different colored eyes. That is a biological trait of their species because most of them are born as genetic chimeras, as are those cats that you see that have the really cool split face, and one side is, black tabby, and the other side is that Snow White cat. Yeah, that's also a genetic chimera. And it's quite common. In fact, it's so common that there are recorded examples of people giving birth to a child that is biologically not related to them. Well, I mean, like, they are related, but like it's, it shows that, oh, this child's mother is your sister, not you. And, you sit there and you look and you're like, I don't have a sister. Or, it's your brother's child. But I'm a single child. Those kinds of things. Those happen a lot. And I mean, that's not even approaching the fact that, those chromosomes don't necessarily have to remain constant throughout the entirety of your life. Now, while it is not common in humans, it is common in a whole bunch of other species. There's a myriad of species that change their sex as they go through their normal life cycle. The biggest example that I can give you is the clownfish. Right? you have a dominant male and a dominant female typically within the environment, and then there is a harem of others that are floating around. And then when one dies, another goes and changes their sex from female to male to become the new dominant male, or from male to female to become the new dominant female. And that happens so much. And none of that is to touch on the species that are born with both sets of chromosomes for their genders. We're talking like snails and a whole bunch of random insects and like mollusks. It's crazy. All of that craziness is just dealing with biological sex in and of itself. So what does that say about our understanding for, I don't know, gender? Well, the first thing that you have to ask is, what is gender? It's just our social conception of sex, right? Meaning that it is a social construct. Meaning that it actually has no real application. It's an idea that we should basically just throw out the window because it means nothing. If you can't tell, I am not a fan of social constructs in any form or fashion because they ruin our understanding of literally everything else. Just straight up. There is no point. So, what really is the point of this video? Well, aside from me just rambling on about how high schools don't teach us enough and our understandings of most things are that we consider basic or wrong, it's to get you thinking. I mean, if something as simple as biological sex was never taught to you correctly, what other things weren't? Anyways, I'll see you next time that I make a video. Hopefully this one will be shorter on its time production. I mean, like, seriously, I'm recording this now in August and I was supposed to record it in June, and then I pushed that off, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll just do it in July, and then I pushed that off, and anyways, see you next time.